Don't drink that." The word scribbled on a folded slip of paper felt like a shard of ice in my hand. I froze, my wine glass halfway to my lips. The happy chatter of the restaurant faded into a dull roar. My son, Michael, was beaming at me, his eyes full of love. My daughter-in-law, Kendra, was smiling her tight, practiced smile. And a stranger had just told me my life was in danger. My name is Martha Kingsley, and my 62nd birthday was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it became the day I discovered that betrayal doesn't always come from a stranger. Sometimes, it wears the familiar smiling face of family. The restaurant, Antonio's, was our favorite spot, a cozy Italian place in the heart of Charlotte, North Carolina. Michael had chosen it, he said, because I deserved the best. The air was thick with the comforting aromas of garlic, baking bread, and rich tomato sauce. Soft golden light glowed from wrought iron fixtures, casting dancing shadows on the rustic wooden tables. It was a scene of perfect familial bliss, a picture I had cherished in my mind for weeks leading up to this night. "Mom, you look beautiful tonight," Michael said, his voice thick with genuine affection. He poured a deep ruby-red Cabernet Sauvignon into each of our glasses. "To the strongest, most incredible woman I know." My heart swelled. After my husband David passed 5 years ago, Michael was my rock. He was the reason I'd found the strength to get out of bed each morning, to rebuild a life that felt halved. Seeing him now, so proud and happy, made me feel like the luckiest mother in the world. Kendra raised her glass alongside his. "To Martha," she said, her voice a little too high, a little too bright, "for being such a special mother-in-law." There was the slightest hesitation before the word special, a tiny crack in the facade that I, in my joy, chose to ignore. I attributed her nerves to the crowd, to the pressure of making everything perfect. We had ordered our usual feast. For me, the chicken parmigiana, crispy and smothered in mozzarella. Michael went for the lasagna, and Kendra, ever watchful of her figure, chose a simple Caesar salad. The conversation flowed easily. Michael talked about his work at the architectural firm, and I shared stories from my book club and the new watercolor class I'd joined at the community center. But throughout it all, I couldn't shake a subtle, nagging feeling of unease. Attention seemed to radiate from Kendra. Her smiles never quite reached her eyes, which kept darting between Michael and me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Her fingers, adorned with the diamond ring my son had worked so hard to buy, drummed a restless rhythm on the tablecloth. I saw her check her phone multiple times, her thumb swiping across the screen with a nervous urgency. When Michael stood for his toast, my eyes welled with happy tears. "To Mom," he began, his voice catching, "for raising me with so much love and strength after Dad died, for teaching me what resilience truly means. You're my hero." I was so moved, so utterly disarmed by his love, that I barely registered the young waitress approaching our table. She was a brunette with a kind face, her hair pulled back in a efficient ponytail. She moved with a quiet grace, leaning in as if to adjust a fork, and in that seamless motion, she slid a small folded note right next to my bread plate. Her eyes, a startlingly clear shade of green, locked with mine for a fraction of a second. The message in them was urgent, desperate before she melted back into the background of the bustling restaurant. My heart hammered against my ribs. Under the pretense of smoothing my napkin, I palmed the note and slipped it into my lap. The paper felt heavy, dangerous. With trembling fingers, I unfolded it beneath the tablecloth. "Don't drink that. Your life is in danger. Trust me." The world stopped. The laughter, the clinking of cutlery, Michael's loving face, it all receded, muffled as if I were submerged in deep water. My vision tunneled, focusing on the glass of wine in front of me. The deep red liquid, moments ago a symbol of celebration, now looked sinister, a potion of unknown malice. My mind raced. Was this a sick joke? A prank? But the waitress's eyes, they held a terrifying sincerity. The foundation of a family can be shattered in a single, silent moment. The question is, what do you build from the ruins? I forced a smile, my facial muscles screaming in protest. "Excuse me," I managed to say, my voice sounding strangely calm. "I just need to visit the ladies' room." I stood on legs that felt like water, clutching the note in my pocket like a lifeline. The walk to the restroom felt endless, a gauntlet of happy, oblivious diners. Once inside the cool, tiled sanctuary, I locked myself in a stall and leaned against the door, breathing heavily. I reread the note, hoping the words had changed. They hadn't. The handwriting was feminine, slightly rushed, but clear. There was no signature, no further explanation, just those 5 devastating words. Your life is in danger. Who? Why? My mind spun, a vortex of fear and confusion. I thought of Michael, his loving toast. It couldn't be him. It was impossible. And then my thoughts turned to Kendra, her nervous energy, her strained smile, the way her eyes kept flicking to my wine glass. A cold dread began to pool in my stomach. I splashed cold water on my face, staring at my reflection in the mirror. The woman who looked back was 62. Yes, but she was strong. She had survived loss. She had built a new life, and she was not going to be a victim. I took a deep, steadying breath, crumpling the note back into my pocket. I had to go back out there. I had to pretend everything was normal. When I returned to the table, the scene was unchanged. Michael was laughing about a story from work. Kendra was nodding along, but her gaze immediately dropped to my wine glass. Then, back to my face, a flicker of something, impatience, anticipation, in her eyes. That look confirmed my deepest, most terrifying suspicion. It was her. The realization was a physical blow, a nausea that had nothing to do with food. This woman whom I had welcomed into my family, whom I had tried to love as a daughter, wanted me dead. The why was a mystery, but the who was now horrifyingly clear. A plan, desperate and born of pure survival instinct, formed in my mind. I couldn't accuse her. I had no proof beyond a note from a stranger. I had to know for sure. I had to see it with my own eyes. The opportunity came when Michael turned to signal our server for a coffee refill. It was a split-second window. With a casualness I did not feel, I reached for my glass. In one fluid, almost invisible movement, I switched it with Kendra's. The glasses were identical, the wine the same vintage. The act felt both monstrous and necessary. I raised the glass that was now, technically, Kendra's. "A toast," I said, my voice remarkably steady, "to family, to the people we love and trust." Michael smiled, clinking his glass with mine. "To you, Mom." Kendra, completely unaware, raised the glass that had been mine, the one she had so carefully poisoned. "To family," she echoed, and her smile for the first time that night seemed genuine. She believed she had won. We all drank. The wine tasted fine, rich, oaky, exactly as it should, but I could barely swallow past the lump of fear in my throat. I watched Kendra, my every sense heightened. For a moment, nothing happened. The conversation resumed. Michael talked about possibly buying a new house, a fixer-upper with character. I mentioned my plans to travel to see my old college friend in Seattle. Kendra contributed, but I saw a faint line of confusion appear between her perfectly sculpted eyebrows. Then it began. Exactly 5 minutes after the toast, she pressed a hand to her abdomen. I feel a bit off," she murmured. Michael immediately turned to her, his face etched with concern. "What's wrong, honey?" "It's probably just something I ate at lunch," she said, but her voice was thin. A sheen of sweat began to glisten on her forehead, despite the restaurant's cool air. Her porcelain skin was taking on a gray, waxy pallor. "I really don't feel well," she whispered, and her hands began to tremble, not with nerves, but with a violent, uncontrollable tremor. When the poison you meant for another courses through your own veins, the truth becomes your only antidote. Panic erupted at our table. Michael stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the tile floor. "Kendra? Baby, talk to me." She tried to stand, but her legs buckled beneath her. She collapsed back into the chair, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. Her eyes were wide, glassy with terror and confusion, staring at nothing. The elegant facade had completely crumbled, revealing a terrified, dying woman beneath. "Call 911, I yelled to Michael, though my own voice sounded distant, detached. The horror of the situation was a cold, hard stone in my chest. My gamble, my desperate act of self-preservation, had worked. The poison meant for me was now working its way through Kendra's body. The note was real. The danger was real. And I was the target. The restaurant descended into a hushed, anxious chaos as other diners watched the scene unfold. Michael was on the phone, his voice cracking as he relayed our location to the dispatcher. He held Kendra's hand, his face a mask of terror and disbelief. I stood frozen, watching the woman who tried to kill me fight for her life, a life she had so carelessly planned to extinguish. The ambulance ride to Presbyterian Medical Center was a blur of flashing lights and sirens. Kendra had lost consciousness, and the paramedics worked frantically over her, their voices a low, professional murmur. In the back of the ambulance, Michael clutched my hand, his grip painfully tight. His tears fell freely. "Mom, I don't understand. What happened? What's wrong with her?" I couldn't answer. I just squeezed his hand back, the crumpled note from the waitress, a girl named Mia, burning a hole in my pocket. It was the only piece of evidence I had that I wasn't losing my mind, that the nightmare was real. In the sterile, unforgiving brightness of the emergency room waiting area, the smell of antiseptic filled my nostrils. We sat on hard plastic chairs, the kind designed for short, uncomfortable stays, not for life-altering tragedies. Michael slumped forward, his head in his hands. "I don't understand," he muttered again, a broken record of grief. "She was fine. Maybe it was food poisoning. The salad." I remained silent. I couldn't tell him. Not yet, not until I was certain. But with every passing second, my certainty grew. This was no case of a bad anchovy. This was calculated. This was murder. After an eternity, a doctor with a kind face and weary eyes approached us. "Are you the family of Kendra Kingsley?" "I'm her husband," Michael said, jumping to his feet. "This is my mother. How is she?" The doctor gestured for us to sit. "Your wife is stable for now. We've managed to control the arrhythmia, but we need to discuss what caused this." He paused, choosing his words with care. The toxicology screen came back positive for digoxin. It's a heart medication. The levels in her system are significantly beyond therapeutic. They are toxic. I felt the air leave my lungs. "Are you saying she was poisoned?" I asked, my voice a hollow whisper. "I can't make that determination," the doctor replied carefully. "But I can tell you that this amount of digoxin does not enter the system accidentally. We will be contacting the police." Michael stared, uncomprehending. "Poisoned? That's impossible. Who would want to hurt Kendra?" It was time. With a hand that trembled only slightly, I pulled the note from my pocket and handed it to my son. His eyes scanned the words, his face shifting from confusion to dawning horror. "Mom," he breathed, his voice cracking, "where did you get this?" And so, in that cold, bright waiting room, I told him everything. About the waitress, Mia, about the note, about the fear that had gripped me, and the desperate split-second decision to switch the glasses. I watched as the truth dismantled my son's world, piece by piece. His face, usually so full of light and life, crumpled in on itself. He sank back into the chair as if all the strength had been drained from his body. "It can't be," he whispered, the words barely audible. "Are you saying someone tried to poison you?" That's exactly what I'm saying, I replied, my voice firm despite the tremor inside. The doctor listened, his expression grave. I will inform the police of this development immediately, he said, and will need to run blood tests on you as well, Mrs. Kingsley, to ensure you haven't been exposed. When the doctor left, a heavy, suffocating silence fell between Michael and me. I could see the gears turning in his mind, connecting fragments of memory, reaching a conclusion he desperately wanted to reject. Michael, I said softly, breaking the silence, I need you to think. Has Kendra been acting strangely lately? Anything at all? He was silent for a long time, wrestling with his loyalty, his love, and the terrifying new reality. When he finally spoke, his voice was a broken whisper. For the last few months, she kept saying she was worried about you. A chill ran down my spine. What kind of worries? She said she noticed you were getting confused, that you forgot things, that maybe we should start thinking about care options. The words hung in the air between us, ugly and cold. Care options. A nursing home. He couldn't look at me. She said she'd researched some nice places, that it would be better for you to have professional care. Michael, I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and heartbreak. I don't have memory problems. I'm not confused. I am perfectly fine. I know, he whispered, the guilt crushing him. My God, I know. But she was so convincing. She showed me articles, talked about red flags. I wanted to believe she was just looking out for you. What else? I pressed, though a part of me was afraid of the answer. Michael covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking. Last month, he mumbled into his palms, she suggested I should get power of attorney over your finances. She said it was just a precaution. I felt sick. The pieces were falling into a horrifying picture. Kendra hadn't just planned to kill me. She had been meticulously laying the groundwork to make my death seem expected, even merciful. She was going to steal my mind, my freedom, and my life, all while playing the part of the concerned, devoted daughter-in-law. The monster wasn't lurking in the shadows. She had been sitting at my dinner table smiling and toasting to my health. This is the beginning of Martha's story. If you felt the chill of her betrayal, let her know in the comments. Your support helps bring these powerful stories to life. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts below. The doctor's words, potentially lethal, echoed in the sterile, antiseptic air of the hospital waiting room. I watched my son, Michael, unravel beside me. The foundation of his world, his marriage, his trust, his very understanding of reality had been vaporized in an instant. It can't be, he muttered for the 10th time, his head in his hands. There has to be another explanation. Maybe she was taking the medication herself? For a heart condition she didn't tell me about? Michael, I said, my voice soft but firm. I placed a hand on his trembling back. The doctor said the amount was toxic, and the note, she was watching me. She was waiting for me to drink from that glass. The crumpled note from the waitress, Mia, felt like a lead weight in my pocket. Your life is in danger. It wasn't just a warning, it was a diagnosis of the sickness that had infected my own family. The police arrived then. 2 detectives with calm eyes and weary expressions. Detective Eva Rostova, a woman with sharp features and a demeanor that invited both fear and confidence, took the lead. She listened as I recounted the entire evening, from the celebratory toast to the frantic ambulance ride. I showed her the note. I told her about switching the glasses. I watched her partner's eyebrows rise slightly. But Detective Rostova simply nodded, her gaze never leaving my face. And you believe your daughter-in-law, Kendra, was the one who poisoned the glass? She asked, her tone neutral. I know she was, I replied, the certainty a cold stone in my gut. I saw the way she looked at it. She was waiting for something to happen. And then, it did. We gave our official statements in a small private room off the main ER. The process was draining, forcing me to relive every terrifying moment. After the detectives left, a nurse came to draw our blood, a final grim confirmation that we were now part of a criminal investigation. It was in the bleak, early hours of the morning, sitting in that unforgiving plastic chair, that Michael finally broke. The dam of his composure shattered and the guilt poured out. "She was so convincing, Mom," he sobbed, his shoulders heaving. "For months. She'd come home and tell me about your episodes. She said she found you staring into space, that you'd forgotten a conversation you'd just had, that you'd left the stove on. She made it sound so plausible." I listened, my heart breaking for him. "What did you say when she told you these things?" "I'd call you," he whispered, his voice thick with shame. "And you'd sound a little tired, a little distant sometimes. And I thought it was the beginning. I thought you were following Dad's path." The mention of his father, David, was a fresh wound. He had succumbed to early onset Alzheimer's, a long, slow goodbye that had devastated us both. Kendra had known that. She had known that fear was the key that would unlock Michael's trust. "She used your love for me against you," I said, the realization a bitter pill. "She knew your greatest fear was watching me fade away, and she weaponized it." He nodded, wiping his eyes with the heel of his hand. "She started talking about being practical, about getting your affairs in order. She said it was the responsible thing to do, to avoid a crisis later. She even had me look at brochures for assisted living facilities. Memory care, she called it. She said they were like luxury resorts." A wave of nausea washed over me. She wasn't just planning to kill me, she was planning to have me institutionalized first, to strip me of my dignity and my freedom, all while positioning herself as the caring, proactive family member. "Michael," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "did I sign anything in the last few weeks? Anything I might not have fully understood?" The color drained from his face. He looked like a ghost. "3 weeks ago," he mumbled, unable to meet my gaze. "She said you'd had a bad day, that you were confused and anxious about your finances. She said you'd asked us to come over to help you sign some papers your lawyer had supposedly sent. When we got there, you were out of it. You seemed groggy, out of focus. You signed them without really reading them." The floor seemed to drop out from under me. "What papers, Michael?" "A limited power of attorney," he choked out, "and an amendment to your will." The most dangerous lies aren't shouted. They are whispered by someone who has earned your trust, weaving a fiction so subtle you mistake it for your own reality. I felt the walls closing in. The plot was so much deeper, so much more insidious than a single poisoned glass of wine. This had been a long, slow, calculated campaign. She had been poisoning my body and my reputation simultaneously, creating a narrative of decline that would make my death, or my disappearance into a nursing home, seem not just logical, but inevitable. "I never spoke to my lawyer, Michael," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of fury and devastation. "I never asked for those documents. She drugged me that day, she must have. She made me appear incompetent and then manipulated me into signing away my autonomy." The horror on his face was complete. He was no longer just the grieving husband, he was the unwitting accomplice. "My God, what have I done? I handed you to her, I helped her." "You didn't know," I said, pulling him into an embrace. He clung to me like he had as a little boy, terrified of a storm. "She manipulated us both, but we know now, and we're going to fight back." The following days were a blur of grim routines. We spent hours at the hospital, though Kendra was kept in a secure wing under police guard. She drifted in and out of consciousness, but when she was awake, she was reportedly combative, denying everything. We spent hours with Detective Rostova, providing more details, going over financial records. It was during one of these meetings, in my own living room, the very room where Kendra had so often cared for me during my supposed confusion, that the detective revealed a piece of the puzzle that made my blood run cold. "Mrs. Kingsley," Detective Rostova began, her notebook open on her lap. "We've been looking into Kendra's background. She worked as a certified nursing assistant for 6 years before she married your son." Michael, sitting beside me on the sofa, stiffened. "She told me she worked in a doctor's office, administrative work." "She did for a time, but before that she was a CNA. She had direct access to medications. She would have been perfectly familiar with the effects of drugs like digoxin." The room felt suddenly colder. "Where did she work?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. "Most recently at a place called Serenity Oaks Assisted Living," the detective said, watching our reactions. The name meant nothing to me, but Michael flinched. That was one of the places she showed me, in the brochures. She said it was the best of the best. Detective Rostova nodded. "There's more. The waitress who gave you the note, Mia Peterson, is a nursing student. Her grandmother, Eleanor Vance, was a resident at Serenity Oaks. She passed away there 2 years ago from apparent heart failure." A heavy silence filled the room. "What does that have to do with Kendra?" Michael asked, his voice hollow. "Kendra was her primary caregiver," the detective said quietly. "At the time, she was using her maiden name, Kendra Poole." The pieces crashed together in my mind with the force of a physical blow. This wasn't her first time. She had a pattern, a method. "Are you saying, my wife? She's done this before?" Michael's question was a strangled whisper. "That is what we are actively investigating now," Detective Rostova confirmed. "Mia recognized Kendra at the restaurant. She had suspicions about her grandmother's death and had been, let's say, keeping an eye on Kendra. When she saw what she believed was a similar situation unfolding, she decided to intervene." I thought of that young woman, Mia, with her urgent green eyes. She hadn't just been a good Samaritan, she had been a hunter, seeking justice for her grandmother, and in doing so, she had saved my life. "I need to speak with her," I said. "I need to thank her." "She wants to speak with you too," the detective said. "I can arrange it." After the detective left, Michael and I sat in the gathering darkness of the living room, not bothering to turn on the lights. The shadows felt like they were closing in, each one hiding a new, terrible truth. "How could I have been so blind?" he murmured into the silence. "All those little things. The pills I found in her purse. She said they were supplements, her constant concern for you. I was so afraid of losing you that I didn't see I was helping her push you away." "What pills, Michael?" I asked, a new dread uncoiling in my stomach. "A few months ago, I found several prescription bottles in her bag. The labels were peeled off. When I asked, she got defensive, said they were herbal supplements for her anxiety and that she was embarrassed. I dropped it. The slow poisoning. It hadn't started with the wine. The dizziness, the fatigue, the bouts of confusion I'd been experiencing for months, the ones I'd blamed on age and stress, they weren't in my head. They were in my system. Kendra had been weakening me, softening me up, making the story of my mental decline more believable. The wine was just the final, lethal chapter. The next day, I met Mia Peterson at a quiet cafe near the police station. She was even younger than I remembered, with a quiet intensity that belied her age. When she saw me, she stood up, her eyes filled with a profound mixture of sorrow and resolve. "Mrs. Kingsley," she said, her voice steady, "I'm so glad you're all right." I took her hands in mine. "I owe you my life, Mia. There are no words to thank you." Tears welled in her eyes. I just wish I could have done the same for my grandmother. We sat, and over steaming cups of tea, she told me her story. Her grandmother, Eleanor, had been a vibrant, independent woman. After a minor fall, Kendra, then Kendra Poole, had inserted herself into Eleanor's life as a kind, concerned caregiver. It was the same pattern, Mia said, her hands wrapped tightly around her mug. She started with little things, telling my mom that Grandma was forgetting things, leaving the stove on. She was so convincing. She made my grandmother doubt herself. She'd say, "Eleanor, don't you remember? We talked about this yesterday." And Grandma, she started to believe her. I listened, my heart aching with the horrifying familiarity of it all. She convinced my family that Serenity Oaks was the best place for her. It was so expensive, but Kendra said it was worth it for the quality of care. Mia's voice broke. She died 6 months later. Natural causes, they said, heart failure. But her heart was always strong. I knew something was wrong, but I was just a kid in college. No one would listen. "You listened," I said softly, "and you acted. Because of you, she can't hurt anyone else." "I just hope it's enough," she whispered. When I left the cafe, I felt a new purpose solidify within me. This was bigger than just me now. It was about Eleanor Vance and whoever else there might be. It was about ensuring Kendra would never again be able to prey on the vulnerable and the trusting. I returned home to find Michael waiting for me, my important documents and financial files spread across the dining room table. His expression was grim but determined. "We're going to fix this, Mom," he said. "We're going to see your lawyer first thing tomorrow and void every document she tricked you into signing. We're going to get a restraining order. We're going to take back control." As I looked at my son, I saw the shadow of the man he was becoming, a man forged in the fire of betrayal, determined to protect what was left of his family. The road ahead would be long and painful. The legal battles, the emotional fallout, the public scrutiny, it was all a daunting prospect. But for the first time since I'd read that note, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a warrior. The poison had been meant to silence me, to erase me, but it had failed. Instead, it had awakened a strength I didn't know I possessed. The love of a mother for her child is a powerful force, but so is her will to survive, and I intended to do both. The web of deception grows tighter. If you're on Martha's side, let her know in the comments. Your support fuels this channel. Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next. "Stupid old woman," Kendra hissed from her hospital bed, her voice a venomous whisper that cut through the sterile air. "You should be grateful. I was going to give you a dignified death. Now you'll just rot slowly in some cheap facility where no one cares about you." The mask was off. The kind, concerned daughter-in-law was gone, replaced by this cold, calculating creature who saw my life as an inconvenience, to be managed and then terminated. I stood my ground, my hand on Michael's arm, holding him back. He was trembling with a rage I had never seen in him. "She's not worth it," I said, my voice steady despite the storm raging inside me. "She can't hurt us anymore." Leaving that hospital room felt like stepping out of a nightmare and into the harsh, clarifying light of day. The demon had a name, a face, and a confession. The fight was no longer just about survival, it was about justice. Detective Rostova called us that evening. "She's talking," she said without preamble. Once she realized the game was up, she decided to try for a plea deal. She's admitted to the attempted murder, Mrs. Kingsley, and to the murder of Eleanor Vance. I gripped the phone tighter, my knuckles white. "And the others?" I asked, the words feeling heavy and terrible in my mouth. "There are 2 others, Detective Rostova confirmed, her tone grim. 2 other elderly women under her care at Serenity Oaks who died of sudden cardiac complications. She's confessing to those as well." I sank into a chair, the weight of it all pressing down on me. 3 lives. 3 women, probably much like me, who had trusted her, whose families had trusted her. Their stories had ended in silence and a falsified death certificate. My story had nearly ended the same way. The deepest scars aren't always visible. They are etched into the soul, a permanent record of the trust that was shattered and the love that was weaponized. The following weeks were a whirlwind of legal proceedings and painful revelations. Our first stop was my lawyer's office, a kind, older man named Arthur Shaw, who had handled David's and my affairs for decades. His face was a mask of professional composure as Michael and I explained the situation, but I saw the flicker of horror in his eyes. "These documents are fraudulent, Martha," he said, holding up the power of attorney and will amendment I had signed in my drugged state. "The circumstances under which you signed them completely invalidate them. We will file a motion to have them voided immediately. Furthermore, we will be filing a civil suit against Kendra for elder abuse, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress." Hearing the legal terms for what she had done made it feel both more real and more surreal. This was my life, reduced to court filings and legal motions. The criminal case against Kendra moved with shocking speed once she began cooperating. She was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. The plea deal she had hoped for was taken off the table. The district attorney decided the evidence was too overwhelming, the crimes too heinous. The trial was a media circus. Our family's private tragedy was splashed across the news, with headlines screaming, "Black widow daughter-in-law," and "poison at the birthday dinner." Michael and I did our best to shield ourselves, but it was impossible to completely avoid the lurid fascination of the public. I testified for 2 days. The prosecutor, a formidable woman named Amanda Jones, guided me gently through my story. I spoke of the love I had for my son, the initial warmth I felt towards Kendra, and the slow, insidious erosion of my sense of self. I described the birthday dinner, the note, the terrifying decision to switch the glasses. I looked at the jury, 12 ordinary people, and saw my own horror reflected in their eyes. Then the defense attorney took his turn. He was a slick, aggressive man who tried to paint me as a confused, paranoid old woman who had never accepted her son's wife. "Isn't it true, Mrs. Kingsley, that you were always jealous of the relationship between your son and Kendra?" he asked, his tone implying I was a meddling mother-in-law from a cliché. "No," I replied, my voice clear and strong. "I was happy my son had found love. What I was not happy about was her systematic attempt to murder me." He tried to trip me up on minor details, to suggest my memory was unreliable. But I was prepared. The poison had clouded my mind, but the truth was now my sharpest weapon. I had lived this nightmare, and I remembered every detail with agonizing clarity. The most powerful testimony came from Mia. She took the stand, a picture of quiet dignity, and told the story of her grandmother, Eleanor Vance. She spoke of a vibrant woman who loved to garden and tell stories, a woman whose light was slowly dimmed by Kendra's care. She presented her own meticulous notes, the result of 2 years of dogged investigation, which detailed the suspicious patterns of deaths at Serenity Oaks that always seemed to coincide with Kendra's employment. When Kendra took the stand in her own defense, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. She had opted for an insanity plea, claiming she suffered from a rare personality disorder that made her believe she was helping. These women find a peaceful transition. She spoke calmly, rationally, about administering medications, about convincing families, about the burden of elderly life. It was chilling. She showed no remorse, only a cold, clinical detachment, as if she were discussing a business strategy rather than the taking of human lives. The prosecutor's cross-examination was brutal. "So you helped Mrs. Vance by convincing her family she had dementia and then poisoning her?" Amanda Jones asked, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I provided comfort and an end to suffering," Kendra replied, her chin held high. "And you were going to help Martha Kingsley by doing the same? For the money?" "It was about stability for my family," Kendra said, her eyes flicking towards Michael, who sat stony-faced beside me. He deserves the life he was meant to have, without the anchor of an aging mother. I felt Michael flinch beside me. Her words were a final, cruel twist of the knife, reducing our bond to an anchor. The jury was out for less than 6 hours. When they filed back in, their faces were grim. The foreman stood. On the count of the murder of Eleanor Vance, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of the murder of Grace Evans, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of the murder of Beatrice Miller, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of the attempted murder of Martha Kingsley, we find the defendant guilty. A collective exhale swept the room. Kendra showed no emotion, simply staring straight ahead as if the verdicts were a minor inconvenience. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole, one sentence for each life she had taken, to be served consecutively. She would die behind bars. There was no victory in that moment. Only a profound, echoing emptiness. A woman was going to prison for the rest of her life. A woman my son had loved. A woman I had once welcomed into my home. The cost of this justice felt immeasurable. In the weeks that followed, a deep silence settled over Michael and me. The constant adrenaline of the trial was gone, leaving us raw and exhausted. The guilt he carried was a palpable presence in the room, a shadow that followed him everywhere. "Mom," he said one evening, as we sat on my porch watching the sunset, "I need to say this. I need you to hear it. I failed you. I saw the signs and I ignored them because it was easier than facing the truth. I let her make me doubt you. I will never forgive myself for that." I took his hand. "Michael, look at me. You were manipulated by a master. She preyed on your love for me, on your deepest fear. This was not your failure. It was her crime. But I should have—" "No," I interrupted, my voice firm. "The should-haves will poison you just as surely as her drugs. We are both victims here, and we have a choice now. We can let this destroy what we have left, or we can use it to build something stronger. I choose to build." It was then that I knew what I had to do. I couldn't live in the house where so much of the poisoning had occurred, both physical and psychological. The very walls seemed to whisper of betrayal. I put the house on the market. The decision to move was liberating. I found a smaller, sun-filled cottage on the outskirts of Charlotte with a big backyard that begged for a garden. The process of packing was cathartic, a purging of the old toxic energy. Michael helped me every step of the way, and with each box we packed, I could see the weight on his shoulders lighten just a little. We also started family therapy. It was there, in the safe, neutral space of the therapist's office, that Michael was finally able to voice his deepest shame. "I think part of me always knew," he confessed, his head bowed. "But if Mom was sick, I could be the hero, the good son who steps up. But if Kendra was a monster, that meant I was the fool who brought a monster into our home. It was easier to believe a lie than to face my own poor judgment." Hearing him say it out loud broke my heart, but it also began the true healing. We were no longer just mother and son. We were fellow survivors, learning a new language of honesty and vulnerability. My friendship with Mia deepened. She became a regular visitor at my new cottage, her determination and strength a constant inspiration. One day, over glasses of iced tea in my new garden, she told me about her plans for the future. "I've decided to specialize in geriatric nursing, Mrs. Kingsley," she said, her eyes shining with purpose. "I want to be the kind of nurse my grandmother should have had, someone who protects their dignity, who listens to them, who believes them." Her words filled me with a sense of meaning. My suffering, as terrible as it was not in vain. It was creating a ripple effect of good. It had saved Mia's future patients from predators like Kendra. I began to find my own purpose. I started speaking at local senior centers and community groups, sharing my story not for sympathy, but as a warning. I talked about the signs of elder abuse, the subtle manipulation, the importance of listening to your instincts. After one talk, a woman approached me, her eyes wide with fear. "My son-in-law has been saying the same things about me," she whispered. "That I'm forgetful, that I need help with my money. I thought I was going crazy, but after hearing you, I'm going to see my doctor alone and get a second opinion." In that moment, I knew I had found my new calling. If I could help even one person avoid the hell I had endured, then my survival had a purpose greater than myself. The past was a closed chapter, a story of poison and betrayal. But the future was a blank page, and for the first time in a long time, I was eager to start writing. The verdict is in, but the healing is just beginning. What lesson resonates most with you from Martha's journey so far? Share your thoughts in the comments. If you're invested in her recovery, show your support with a like and subscribe. I am not a victim. I am a survivor. And every morning I wake up free in my own home, in control of my own mind and my own life, is a victory. It is my sweetest, most peaceful revenge. I spoke these words to a room of 50 people at the Charlotte Senior Center. A mix of older adults and their family members watched me, their faces a canvas of empathy, shock, and dawning recognition. When I finished my talk, recognizing the wolf in Grandma's clothing, a survivor's guide to elder abuse, the silence held for a moment before breaking into sustained, heartfelt applause. Hands went up and the questions began, tentative at first, then pouring out in a torrent of shared fear and uncertainty. This was my life now. 6 months after the trial, the nightmare had receded, replaced by a purpose I had never anticipated. The move to the cottage had been the best decision I could have made. Its sunny rooms held no ghosts. The large backyard was my sanctuary, my hands finding solace in the rich, dark soil, planting roses and lavender where only weeds had grown before. Each bloom felt like a defiance of the darkness Kendra had tried to sow. Michael was healing too. Our Sunday lunches were sacred, a reclaimed tradition. We'd cook together, the kitchen filled with the comforting smells of roasting chicken and baking bread, sounds and scents that slowly overwrote the memory of poisoned wine. On this particular Sunday, he arrived with a woman named Sarah. My breath hitched for a second, an involuntary reflex born of trauma. But one look at her eased my fears. Sarah had a warm, open face and a handshake that was firm and genuine. She was a teacher, and she'd met Michael in the support group he'd been attending for families of violent crime victims. "It's so wonderful to finally meet you, Martha," she said, handing me a bouquet of sunflowers. "Michael talks about you all the time. He says you're the bravest person he knows." The simplicity of the gesture, the directness of her words, it was the antithesis of Kendra's calculated charm. Over lunch, she listened more than she spoke, and when she did, her comments were thoughtful and real. She didn't try to impress or ingratiate. She was just present. After lunch, while Sarah offered to wash the dishes, Michael pulled me aside in the garden. "What do you think, Mom?" he asked, a nervous hope in his eyes that I hadn't seen in years. "I think she's lovely, Michael," I said, and I meant it. "She's honest. I can see it in her eyes." He let out a sigh of relief. "I've learned my lesson, Mom. No more secrets. No more ignoring my gut. Sarah knows the whole story, every ugly part. There's nothing to hide." Healing isn't about forgetting the storm. It's about learning to dance in the rain that follows, finding a new rhythm in a world washed clean by truth. Later that week, I met Mia for our now regular coffee date. She was bursting with news. "I got the placement," she said, her face radiant, "at the new geriatric wing of Presbyterian. It's exactly what I wanted. I'll be working directly with elderly patients, advocating for them, making sure their voices are heard." "Oh, Mia, that's wonderful!" I felt a surge of pride so fierce it brought tears to my eyes. This remarkable young woman was turning her personal tragedy into a shield for others. Your grandmother would be so proud. It's because of you too, Martha, she said, squeezing my hand. Seeing you stand up in court, watching you take back your life, it showed me that the people I want to help aren't just victims, they're warriors, and they deserve a warrior in their corner. Our conversation was a testament to how beauty can grow from the most scarred ground. Our bond, forged in the crucible of Kendra's betrayal, was now a source of immense strength for us both. The life I was building felt sturdy, real. I had my son back, our relationship deeper and more honest for having been tested by fire. I had a new friend in Mia, a connection that felt like family chosen by the heart. I had my cottage, my garden, and my voice. And then the letter came. It was a Tuesday. The mail was mostly bills and gardening catalogs, but one plain white envelope stood out. It had no return address, but the handwriting, precise, elegant, and utterly unmistakable, made my blood run cold. It was from Kendra. My first instinct was to throw it straight into the fireplace, to watch her words turn to ash and be done with it. I owed her nothing. Not my time, not my energy, not a single moment of my hard-won peace. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. A part of me needed to know what she could possibly have to say. With trembling hands, I sat at my kitchen table and slit the envelope open. Martha, I imagine you're surprised to hear from me. They keep us busy here, but the mind has a lot of time to wander. I've been thinking about you. I hope you can appreciate now with some distance that what I planned for you was an act of mercy, a controlled and dignified conclusion. The path you're on now, the slow, inevitable decay, the loneliness that is the inheritance of every aging widow, is a far crueler fate. I was going to spare you that. I was going to give Michael his future, unburdened, and give you a peaceful end. It was a practical solution to a biological inevitability. This place is insufferable. The women here are petty and small-minded. They can't see the larger picture. I suppose I should have expected nothing more. I hope you'll think on what I've said. In the end, I was the only one who was ever truly practical about your situation. Kendra. I read it twice, a cold laugh escaping my lips. Even now, imprisoned for multiple murders, she saw herself as the rational heroine, the clear-eyed problem solver in a world of sentimental fools. There was no apology, only a chilling reaffirmation of her warped philosophy. She felt no remorse for her actions, only resentment for her punishment. That night, I did burn the letter. I watched the flames lick at the paper, curling the words mercy and practical into blackened crisps before they vanished. It was a ritual, a final act of release. She had sent those words to hurt me, to claw back some semblance of power. But as I watched the smoke rise, I felt nothing but pity. She was trapped forever in her own toxic narrative, while I was free. The seasons turned. My garden flourished, a vibrant tapestry of color and life. My talks at community centers became more frequent, and I even started a small, informal support group for other seniors who had experienced manipulation or abuse. We called ourselves the Resilient Hearts, and in that circle, we found strength in our shared stories. One afternoon, Michael and Sarah came over to help me plant a new cherry tree in the backyard. As we worked, our hands dirty, laughing as we argued about the exact right depth for the roots, I felt a profound sense of completion. The past was not forgotten. It was a part of me, a scar that reminded me of my strength, but it no longer controlled me. "You know, Mom," Michael said, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, "I was so afraid I'd lost you forever. Not just to what she planned, but that I'd broken our relationship beyond repair." "Love isn't a vase, Michael," I said, patting the soil around the base of the young tree. "It doesn't shatter irreparably when it's dropped. It's more like this tree. It can be damaged. It can lose leaves, but if the roots are deep and strong, it can heal. It can grow back even fuller than before. Sarah smiled, linking her arm through Michael's. I think that's the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over our new tree, I knew my transformation was complete. Martha Kingsley, the victim, the intended prey, was gone. In her place was a woman who had stared into the abyss of familial betrayal and not only survived, but emerged wiser, stronger, and more compassionate. My story is not a cautionary tale about evil. It is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It is proof that even when the person you trusted most tries to erase you, your voice can still be found. It can still speak, it can still teach, and it can still love. At 62, my life is not winding down. It is beginning again on my own terms, surrounded by a love that is honest and true. And that is the greatest gift of all. Martha's journey shows us that even the deepest wounds can heal into sources of strength. If her story moved you, let her know in the comments. Your support helps share these powerful narratives. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your own thoughts below.